Hey there. Scrolling through articles about self-sufficiency again, getting ready to ditch those store-bought tomatoes and grow your own. Well, you're in the right place because today we are diving into modern homesteading and all its facets.
You are definitely not alone. It's really amazing to see how many people are interested in this, and it's really changing, It's not your grandparents' homesteading anymore.
You're right. When I hear homesteading, I picture like a log cabin and a sprawling garden. Not exactly an apartment balcony, right? But I'm seeing more and more about urban homesteading, which is kind of blowing my mind. What exactly is modern homesteading these days? Someone tell me how this works.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. It takes the core ideas, like growing your own food, maybe raising some livestock if you can, making things yourself. Really, it's about relying less on those big systems. But the cool part is it's not about going off the grid completely. It's about fitting those ideas into our lives now, wherever we are, even in a busy city.
Okay, so you're saying I don't need to inherit a farm to get my fresh eggs. That's a game changer. But really, though, how does this work if you're living in, an apartment building?
Yeah.
Do people actually have, rooftop chickens?
That might be pushing it. Your neighbors might not be too thrilled about that. I'm not sure about the legalities of that one. But you're hitting on something important. A lot of it is about being creative with the space you have. One of the articles you sent mentioned, it was a conversation with these two urban homesteaders, and they were talking about things like vertical gardening. So you're basically making the most of your space by growing up instead of out.
Vertical gardens. Those are so cool. I love those pictures, where you've got all these plants growing up the side of a building, and it's like this little oasis in the middle of the city.
Exactly. That's what it made me think of. And then there's things like hydroponics. So you're growing without soil, just in water. Oh, and get this. They were talking about these really cool systems. What are they called? Aquaponics. It's like this self-contained system where you've got fish and plants growing together. The fish waste fertilizes the plants, which I know sounds a little weird, but it's supposed to be super efficient.
Okay, see, that is way cooler than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
I was picturing like a sad little herb garden on a windowsill, but this is next level. But can you really grow enough food that way to make a difference? Are we talking supplementing your diet or actually cutting down on grocery store trips?
That's the big question, right? And honestly, it probably depends. You see that in all these articles, like how much space you have is a big factor. But even growing a little bit yourself, even if it's just herbs or joining a community garden, it makes a difference. Especially in a city, I think it's less about being totally self-sufficient and more about being connected to your food again.
And it's not just about the food either, is it? I mean, you've got people raising chickens in their backyards, even beekeeping. I can't imagine having honey from my own bees. That would be amazing. But it does make you wonder about technology's place in all of this, right? It seems kind of contradictory. We're talking about these age-old practices, but in this super tech-driven world, is technology helping or hurting modern homesteading?
That's a really interesting question, because it's not one or the other. Actually, what we're seeing is that tech can be a really powerful tool. There are apps for pretty much every aspect of this now, which just blows my mind.
Seriously, I was just reading about that. You've got apps to help you plan your garden, keep track of when to harvest things, even ones that'll tell you how much moisture is in your soil. It's wild.
Right. It's incredible. And it's more than just the practical stuff, too. One thing that really struck me was how important online communities are for modern homesteaders.
Oh, absolutely. It's like this whole network of people sharing advice, figuring things out together, even selling homemade stuff, like a modern take on the old bartering system,
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. This cool mix of old and new, where people are using technology to connect and do things that have been done for generations. But that connection, that need to connect, that seems to go way beyond just the internet.
Yeah, you can really see that in everything we're looking at today, this need to connect. And it's not just about connecting with other people online. It's sustainability seems to be a really big deal in this whole modern homesteading thing. And not just in a trendy way, but people really seem to care about this stuff.
It's so true. It's really about understanding how, what we do impacts the planet. Sustainability is a big part of the mindset.
Yeah, and you see that everywhere, right? People are composting, collecting rainwater, using solar panels. It's they're creating these little self-sustaining bubbles, even in the city.
Exactly. It's taking responsibility, making different choices. Because relying on those big systems can be really unsustainable. A lot of people are starting to see that.
Totally. Okay, but let's be real for a second. There have to be downsides. Even with vertical gardens and all that, it's not like city living suddenly gives you tons of space. And the time commitment. I can only imagine.
You're right. It's definitely something to think about. Space is a big one, especially in cities. And time, yeah, it takes work. Gardening, taking care of animals if you have them, keeping everything going. It's not just a hobby.
No kidding. And the learning curve? I can barely keep a houseplant alive. Can you imagine trying to figure out composting? Or like canning your own food? Talk about intimidating.
I know what you mean. A lot of us, we didn't grow up learning this stuff, but that's where those online communities can be so helpful. Remember we were talking about how people share tips and stuff? Well, they're not just sharing recipes. You can find all kinds of resources, tutorials, online classes, like anything you can think of, from basic gardening to really advanced stuff like permaculture.
Permaculture. Okay, yeah, I've heard that word, but to be honest, I have no clue what it actually means.
It's actually pretty cool when you start to get into it. It's basically a way of designing systems, like how we live and grow things that work with nature instead of against it.
Yeah.
So it's about being sustainable, working with the natural cycles and rhythms.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And it totally fits with this whole modern homesteading thing. So like using these old ideas, but in a new way. But I got to ask, with all the challenges, the space thing, the time, all this stuff we just talked about, what makes people want to do this? Why go through all that?
That is the million-dollar question. And honestly, it's different for everyone. You see that reading these articles. But a lot of it comes down to like wanting to be more self-sufficient, knowing where your food comes from, being more in control of things. And of course, that desire to live more sustainably, trying to reduce their impact, live in a way that feels, I don't know, more aligned with their values.
So it's more than just a practical thing, huh? Like wanting to save money on groceries or whatever.
Yeah, it goes deeper than that. For a lot of folks, it's about feeling more connected to nature, to like the seasons and where their food comes from. And you see it in those online groups too. People want to be part of a community that gets it, who share those values.
Like bringing back something we've kind of lost, right? In this whole modern life, we're so disconnected from everything.
Yeah.
And this is a way to get back to something real.
Yeah, totally. And what I think is so cool is that you don't have to like go full on Little House on the Prairie. It's not all or nothing. We saw that, right? Modern homesteading, it's about finding ways to fit those ideas into your life, whether you've got a balcony or a backyard or whatever.
It's funny. We started out talking about tomatoes from the store.
Yeah.
But now I'm picturing that tomato fresh off the vine, warm from the sun, knowing I actually grew that. It just feels different, It's more than just a tomato. It's like this whole other way of looking at things.
It really is. Taking back that control, being more connected to what you eat, how you live, making those choices.
I love that. So as we wrap up our deep dive today, one last thing to think about. If you could pick just one thing, one little piece of this modern homesteading life to try, what would it be? What speaks to you?
Oh, that's a tough one. There's so many possibilities. But it's about finding that one thing that gets you excited, that feels right for you,
And hey, you never know. Maybe that one little step, that one tomato plant on your windowsill, it could be the start of something amazing.